To było rozpoczęcie konferencji, taka część, która zawsze w tych deklaracjach jest nam bardzo potrzebna, ale jestem przekonany, że jesteście Państwo strasznie ciekawi, co wydarzy się dalej. Otóż Charles Montgomery, którego za chwilę zaproszę na scenę, był gościem tej konferencji w 2019 roku. Zarażał jej uczestników pasją do tworzenia czegoś, co określa jako Miasto Szczęśliwe. A my dzisiaj, w 2021 roku, jesteśmy niezmiernie ciekawi, na ile ta wizja zmieniła się przez te 2 lata, które pokazały, że wiele rzeczy, które wydawałyby się nam niemożliwe, na przykład niemożliwe, żeby się nie dało pójść do pracy, stały się częścią naszej codziennej rzeczywistości. Charles Montgomery, the stage is yours. Welcome to the stage.
Can you hear me? Yes. Dzień dobry. Dziękuję. This feels like a bit of a dream to me. The last time I left home was 2 years ago. I got on a plane from Vancouver, Canada, and I flew across the world to this incredibly beautiful city. Your city, Mayor. It's so wonderful to be back. Now, before I start, I just want to note that I'm supposed to be a representative of the notion of happiness, and happiness also includes comfort. And I find sitting in a chair very uncomfortable for a long period of time, and you've now sat for an hour. If you'd like to, would anybody want to just stand up and shake out a little bit? I give you permission to do that now. Just shake it out, stand up. This is also a test to see if you need a translator apparatus. Okay, good. Okay, so we can all get comfortable again. So, again, it's so special for me to be back here in one of my favorite cities, working with a clicker that works, which is terrific. My message to you today is similar to the message I gave 2 years ago, but I don't want to repeat that message. But I would like to advance my slides. There we go. And I want to hone in. The last time I spoke with you, I spoke generally about the notion and about your responsibility to be creating happier places. But I think we've reached a moment in history where we need to consider the behavioral aspects of the city spaces and systems we create. And I want to remind you in your work that you are shaping cities, yes, but you're also shaping relationships. And by shaping relationships, you're shaping lives. And this has become, for me, a much more important point in the last 2 very challenging years, this notion of relationships. And to explain this to you, I'm going to share with you a couple of stories and some science, and maybe some very gentle criticism. So I'd like to begin this story in Dubai. And here we are. So everybody knows about the wonders and the fantasy of the United Arab Emirates, of the city of Dubai in particular, where their wealth is only matched by their tremendous imagination. If you want to build the tallest building in the world, sure, let's do that. If you want to create new cities on islands shaped like palm trees. Sure, why not do that? And then while you're doing it, why don't you build some of the most ridiculously fun recreation facilities in the Middle East, like the best water park in Asia? And this is a great way to attract the top happiness experts in the world who came to enjoy your water slides. Now, none of this should be a surprise because Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler of the United Arab Emirates, he really cares about happiness. He's very concerned about making the United Arab Emirates into the happiest country in the world. So as part of that aspiration, the UAE has a national housing program. And In Canada, we have a national housing program, which is to build housing for the poorest Canadians, to ensure that everybody has a home. In the Emirates, the national housing program is a little bit different. It ensures that every adult Emirati male gets essentially a mansion. And so these, I'm having trouble seeing these images advance. So for those folks working in the tech room, perhaps when I just say now, you could advance to the next slide then. So I'll say now, see if that works. You press the forward button. There we go. Thank you. So here's the idea. In the Emirates, they have a national housing program. And what this means is, if you are qualified for the program, you don't get an apartment, you don't get a flat, you get a mansion. And maybe the mansion looks like now. Not quite the tallest buildings in the world. The ridiculous thing is, this national housing program, which is designed specifically to create happier communities for Emiratis, it's not in the center of the city, it's not connected to transit, it's not connected to anything. It's out here. The new communities are built out in the middle of the desert now. And so your mansion may look like this, it may not look like this. But I think most Emiratis believe that if they realize their dream of having a mansion, they'll be happier. And here's the unfortunate thing, that because of the way these communities are built, this program is not making people happier now. Because the new communities in the National Housing Program are built far out in the desert, in disconnected places. In fact, this is an image from the United Arab Emirates, but it might as well be from Phoenix in the United States. The Emiratis have adopted the worst practices from American suburban placemaking. And what it means is this now, is that their new communities with the world's greatest wealth are more wasteful. People have to drive everywhere to reach anything. They're carbon intensive, obviously. They're incredibly unhealthy. Nobody walks anywhere. They're lonely. When you move there with your family, you bring your parents, you bring your children, and suddenly your parents, they can't see their friends anymore. They can't walk out on the street. There's nowhere to walk. Children can't walk to school. There's an incredible heaviness and sadness in these communities. After all this money, the richest people in the world have built systems that are unhappy for themselves. So now that I've really made you happy with that story, I think this takes us to the main challenge I think we all face now. And that is, we're dealing with these convergent urban emergencies. The Emirates are dealing with them, and you're dealing with them in Poland, and we're dealing with them in Canada as well. These are familiar, and the Emirates has taught us that just throwing money at your problems is not going to fix them. So what emergencies am I talking about now? I'm talking first about climate change. As we know, we are now in climate code red. This is a community, stay with me here, please. This is a community near my home city. One day, they experienced the hottest temperatures on Earth, and everybody thought, wow, that was a difficult day. The next day, the entire town just burnt down. This is happening all over Western North America right now. So we're in the climate emergency, and it's going to be affecting all cities. Now, we also know we're facing this tremendous housing crisis. Who would have thought at the beginning of the pandemic that we would be worried that there wasn't enough housing? And not only that, is it's not affordable anymore. And I heard the president of your region talking about the desperate need for more housing in this particular region, but it's happening in cities around the world. But I think these emergencies are happening in the context of another emergency that binds them all together now. And this emergency concerns human trust. The trust we need to work together, to cooperate, to solve and collaborate on our greatest challenges: climate change, inequity, poverty, conflict, immigration. Now, these conflicts are all emerging at the same time, and if we can't agree, if we can't work together, we simply will not solve them. So I want to touch on this notion of trust a little bit. Social trust is in trouble around the world. These graphs here, for example, just take us to 2014, and since then there has been a precipitous decline in social trust. Most people don't believe that other people can be trusted now. We see this playing out politically, where there's this tremendous loss of trust in political leaders and political processes now. And we see this playing out in Poland. Your own statistics agency shows that only 34% of Polish people believe that strangers can be trusted. You trust the Fire and Emergency Services Department, 95, 96%, but you don't trust strangers and you don't trust your politicians. I've enjoyed meeting your politicians, and I have tremendous trust for you. So this reflects not necessarily a crisis in honesty and credibility as much as it reflects other crises. Now, continuing on this notion of social disconnectedness and loss of trust, it's all related, it's all connected. We're seeing loneliness amongst young people and elders in our communities spiking. Tremendous rise in loneliness, and we know that being lonely in society has the health effect of smoking 15 cigarettes every day. It's deadly, but it's also incredibly sad. So pulling all these together now, here we are with these converging difficulties, and then COVID hits 2 years ago. And I think one thing that COVID taught us is just how desperately we need to be together, how much we miss each other when we're apart. Sure, we can do it. Some of us can work at home. Some of us like to be alone. But even introverts are reporting being made more happy when they have those essential contacts with family and friends, and will do anything to reach out and to be able to touch each other again. So there's our context. And what do we do about it now? I believe there are many causes of this crisis of social disconnection, and there are many solutions. But we, together as city builders, can help by building communities that nurture trust, that nurture relationships. Now, had this been 2 or 3 years ago, I would have given you a recipe for building those communities. But you know the recipe already. You've heard it, you've done it now. So I'll just summarize the things you already know. We've learned together that walkable, connected, medium-scale places, these are the places that give us opportunities to meet in a cozy way, to meet in a comfortable way, to bump into neighbors on the street, to feel a sense of belonging. And you will note one of my favorite places in this city down in the bottom right-hand corner, Dorota. And thank you for your work on this project. So we know these things are good for us. We also know now that when our communities are connected through various forms of mobility, but especially active mobility, walking, cycling, transit, that we can break out of our bubbles, we can experience the rest of the city, we can enjoy the opportunities the rest of the city has to offer. So we know that our walkable, connected, well-served by mobility places can offer us all these things. We know that. So today I wanted to talk about 3 particular challenges in getting to this model of living, to this happier way of living. Now, so we need to design places for trust. There are 3 things I'm going to talk about in the rest of this presentation. Number 1, I want to talk about how we need to reset our systems. Imagine your city as an operating system. The operating system is broken in many ways, and I want to talk about how to fix that in certain ways that don't involve design quite so much. Then I want to talk about social architecture, because I've been on my own personal journey of finding that place to call home. And we've learned some lessons in the process. And then I want to talk about your superpower as citizens and as city builders. And that superpower is diversity, human diversity. Okay, so let's jump into it. Number 1, I want to talk about the system reset. Now, I may have showed you this data the last time I visited you. Here's something we know. You know this in your heart, and the data proves it to be true. The longer you drive alone in your car to get to work every day, the less happy you are. And it doesn't matter the trade-offs you make. You may get a better home or a higher paying job. It doesn't matter. People are reporting lower life satisfaction the longer their commutes are. We know it's awful. We know we don't want it. We know we need to change. Now we come to Poland. You have more automobiles per capita than most places in Europe. And you also have the highest congestion in your big cities than other cities in Europe. And you're trying hard to fix that. I see that now. You're taking more and more space away from pedestrians, making it harder for people to cross the street now. You're creating great new parking spaces for pedestrians, or for cars, where pedestrians used to be. And I'm teasing you a little bit, but I want to warn you, this path of creating more and more space for vehicles, it leads now to an inevitable cycle of building and building and building. You can just ask the citizens of Houston, who are now expanding their Catty Freeway to beyond 26 lanes. Their baseball stadium can fit within the width of this freeway. And they keep building this freeway wider and wider and wider, and it doesn't seem to be solving their traffic problems because, as we've all learned, but we keep forgetting, when you build more road space, more cars will come. And you can spend the money, but it will not help you achieve your goal. So how can we reset that system? I mean, the most obvious way to reset that system is to spend our money differently now. If you just consider the case of Copenhagen. And it's so funny to speak about Copenhagen and other cities of the world because they always say, well, we're not like the Danes. We can't do what they did. We're a different culture. Where in fact, in Denmark, they were a different culture 20 years ago. And in Copenhagen, 25, 30 years ago, they were going bankrupt. They could no longer spend the money on automobile infrastructure. That's when they started to spend on bike infrastructure. That's how they saved money, A. And B, that is now how they've become one of the most successful cities in the world around mobility and urban innovation. And, well, just try and buy a house in Copenhagen now, and you'll see how attractive that market has become. So now, we thought for so long, so many people thought it's so difficult to achieve that kind of vision. We would need a massive shakeup in our way of thinking. And what do you know? COVID has actually provided, for all its horrors and the sadness and the pain that the pandemic has brought us, it has created a shift in cities around the world now. Just look at Vienna, which in 2020, streets went from being automobile sewers to complete human spaces. In the course of a few short months, we began to experiment now. In my city, in Vancouver, we realized people needed to go. Another idea, please. I understand even here in the city, you're mandating is it 1.5 parking spots per residence. You know, this is something that's been done around the world for a couple of decades, and we're stopping. The progressive jurisdictions are all ending this. By mandating parking spaces, you are increasing the cost of your housing. You're forcing developers into shackles to charge more for housing. And you're actually forcing the creation of less housing because, as we can see, cars take room. And that's room that people should be using. Now, cities such as Minneapolis, which is dealing with an affordability issue, number one, what they did was upzone the entire city to allow for more housing everywhere, but they also ended the practice of mandating parking minimums next. And this, for the development community, allows you to place more of a market mechanism on the cost of parking. So you don't have to build it unless you think your clients need it, and then you can sell it separately from the cost of housing. Next. Finally, I want to note, I keep hearing about the challenges of finding money and funding for infrastructure such as metro systems, transit systems, and we know there's this tremendous competition between spending on roads and spending on transit. And you know, this is a challenge for cities around the world. And if you haven't done so already, next, I would like to encourage you to look at the model of the MTR in Hong Kong, where your transit agency is also your property developer. Don't worry, developers, they're working in PPPs, private-public partnerships, in conjunction with other developers